Hi there everyone, welcome back to another Perfect Pairings with me. We're heading outdoors for inspiration today, focusing on a soothing nature-inspired color palette. Get ready to make a non-floral card that's both elegant and simple, showing you how to infuse your project with a heartfelt message and makes a lasting, meaningful impression. Let's start with the Find Joy Layering Stencil set. I love this stencil set because it works up really quickly, and you can put this wonderful sentiment right in the center of your cardstock panel, and you've got an instant card. I am selecting a few layers from this stencil set, and we'll build on this image and incorporate other images onto this card. But for now, I'm going to start with my 9x12 sticky mat grid and center a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel of white cardstock to the center. I'll start with the open base layers of stencil layer number 1 and Find Joy and center that on top of my A2 size panel. I will use satin masking tape to hold down the sides of the stencil just to help create an additional point of contact for these thinner areas. Then I'll incorporate some of the new colors for November 2025. This is Silver Sprout Fresh Dye ink, and I'll use a mini ink blending tool to fill in the foliage layers of stencil layer number 1. And then also new for November 2025, this is Celestial Mist Fresh Dye ink. I'll use another mini ink blending tool and fill in the flower layers of this background. That finishes the first layer, and then we'll move on to stencil layer number 2. The second detail layer contains these dot fillers, which I'm using ginger root for, and this time I'm using one of the micro blending brushes to fill in this image. Once I filled in all of those dots, then I'll use Glacier Iris and another micro blending tool to fill in the detail layer of these open petals. Then finally, moving down to stencil layer number 3, I'll use another micro blending tool to fill in the flower centers using Twilight Sky, and then Olive Grove for the branch images that accompany the leaves and the flower stems. Now this is where you would use that final stencil to fill in the center area of this cardstock panel. But instead, what I'm going to do is set this panel aside and work on other elements to this card. I'm bringing in an older product. This is Wood Cookie die set. And I love this faux wood grain slice for a beautiful backdrop for a nature-inspired card. I cut a base layer from Espresso, the bark layer from Mocha, and the wood grain from Sand Dunes. And all you have to do to assemble this wood grain slice is to follow the outer outline of the bark between the bark layer and the base layer. Then once you've applied glue to the wood grain layer, it aligns perfectly within the center of our wood cookie. Aside from the wreath frame that we made from Find Joy Layering Stencil set, this wood cookie is also going to help draw your eyes towards the center of the card. Let's keep building this card. The next product I'm going to grab is the Hazelnut Branch Layering Die set. This was part of the Cozy Comfort Retreat and was an exclusive item, but now it's available widely to all of you. Again, we won't use all of the images in this die set. And on my Petal Palette tray here, I've already die cut a few pieces. This base layer is cut from Olive, and then the detail veined leaf image layer is cut from Marshland. So dark chocolate is that base, Sand Dunes is that rim of the shell, and Mocha is the hazelnut itself. I'll use the new November 2025 Fresh Dye inks to create a slight ink blended layer on top of Marshland. So I'm using Olive Grove on top of Marshland Crafty Necessities cardstock to apply a slight shadow to the base of the leaves. Then on top of the Olive Crafty Necessity cardstock die cuts, I'll apply the darkest color in the set, which is Mossy Granite. And as those inks are drying back, I'll quickly assemble the hazelnut image, following the keyhole alignment guide found on the back of the die set packaging. And then I also foam mounted the hazelnut itself within the shell to cover up that alignment guide and also give a little bit of dimension to my little hazelnut. With my dedicated white mini ink blending tool and cloud white pigment ink, I'll apply a little fuzzy layer or a highlight layer to the hazelnut just to give this hazelnut a little bit more of a realistic appearance, match the blending that's on the leaves, and just enough to add a slight white highlight and shine to the hazelnut. Then I will glue and assemble the leaf images from Hazelnut branch, matching up the outer outline of the base and detail layers of these leaves. And then once everything is glued down, I'll add this back to my tray and work on some more additional elements to this card. I really wanted to fill this card front, kind of give it that folk art appearance, and also show how well these older and newer Altenew products work together. So bringing in my stamp wheel, original stamp wheel, this is the 7.5-inch platform. I'll bring in the slightly newer Mini Delight Garden Friend, and using that panel of sand dunes that I used to cut the hazelnut image and also the wood grain from Wood Cookie, I'll stamp and layer the chipmunk image using my stamp positioning tool. Using the Earth Tones family of inks, I'll start with the lightest value of ink, which is Shattered Shell, and create a solid impression of this image on top of sand dunes. Then moving down my line of inks, I'll stamp the next layer in Warm Linen, the third layer in Ginger Root, and finally the last layer in Umber Shadow. I'll fussy cut the stamped image, leaving a slight margin of sand dunes around the chipmunk, and I'll add this little guide to my tray of other images to use on this card. Back on my 9x12 sticky mat grid, I've already die cut the cluster of leaves from Mini Delight Garden Friend, and I'll arrange these pink diamond cardstock pieces on top of my sticky mat grid in preparation for some ink blending. I'm creating a vivid shadow of coral berry right at the base of the leaves, and using another mini ink blending tool to quickly apply this color to all of the images. I'll let this ink dry back on my tray, and now we can work on the assembly of this card. I'm bringing back that Fine Joy stenciled background, and I love the muted tones of this to really help the foliage layers, the chipmunk, and everything else that goes on top of it really stand out. To the center of my Fine Joy background, I'll foam mount my Wood Cookie die cut layers and get this image as centered as I can on my white cardstock panel. Then using some liquid glue, I'll frame the bottom right portion of my Wood Cookie and arrange these leaf layers in a way to help frame the hazelnut image on the bottom right. Behind my hazelnut leaves and the hazelnut, I'll foam mount the Mini Delight Garden Friend chipmunk guy to the center of my Wood Cookie. And then for that extra bit of brightness throughout this card, I'll arrange the pink diamond cardstock Coral Bliss ink blended leaves and nestle them and frame this scene with these supporting foliage elements. I love that even though these leaves are really bright, that it still really helps frame the foliage elements, the chipmunk, and the upcoming sentiment for this heartfelt card. So I'll continue gluing down these pieces around the Wood Cookie, around the little chipmunk, tucking the images behind the leaves, creating this crescent or C-shaped movement throughout the background. Then once I've got everything glued down, all I need is the heartfelt sentiment that I want to incorporate into the scene. I couldn't quite decide again what I wanted to use in the stash, so I used one of the Altenew freebies again. This is the Printable Sentiments sentiment set. You can print these sentiments directly from your printer. They're free at the Altenew website, and you can create these beautiful and stunning, very simple sentiment banners to add to whatever project that you want. I chose this Thinking of You Always, again, to fit that heartfelt feeling of this card. And I used a little bit of Instant Dimension foam tape to make sure that this stands out on my card front. And by the way, the source of this color palette, I just found it online. I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it would be a nice challenge to incorporate this really bright pink leaf amongst the more earth tone elements of this card. And it definitely didn't disappoint. But before I foam mount my sentiment, I like to add my splatter before, just so I don't obstruct anything on the sentiment itself. So to apply my splatter, I grabbed this much older product. I haven't used this in a while. It's the watercolor brush refill, marker refill. This is in the color Espresso, and I thought it matched everything on this card front. And I diluted it a little bit with some water, and then used a fine water brush from Altenew to add my splatter. Then all I've got to do is foam mount the sentiment on top, as I mentioned. And that finishes this very bold but very heartfelt card, using a variety of products from the Altenew November 2025 release, and also some older items that I've loved holding on to in my Altenew stash. If you want to recreate a heartfelt card just like this one, I've got all of the products linked in the description box, and other items that will surely spark your creativity.